for your first taster of the CPD activities that IQ and HCTa are going to bring you. Lee Brownsword, Associate Director, Industrial Environmental Policy, is going to talk to us about the new decarbonisation roadmap that Ceramics UK have launched, explaining how the industry can progress to net zero, providing a clear overview of the low carbon ceramic engineering could look like. So over to you, Lee. Hopefully the slides are going to work for you.
Thanks, Paula. Doesn't look like it, so we'll perhaps just make a start, and if you could just knock it on and then see what happens. So yes, good morning everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Paula. So yes, decarbonising UK ceramic manufacturing. As we are Ceramics UK. Ceramics UK is the trade association for the UK ceramics industry, and recently we've rebranded from formerly being the British Ceramic Confederation. Could you knock on, please, Paula? Now, the rebranding of the organisation is in part about pushing the importance of ceramics in underpinning all facets of society in our daily lives, and ceramics being essential for the whole economy. So lots of highly demanding, long-lasting applications in which ceramic products are used for, including, well, by virtue of their durability, their longevity, mechanical, thermal, electrical, biochemical properties, all these properties that are made through obviously the firing stage of ceramic manufacture, and the applications in which these are used are often for the functionality, the safety and the efficiency of various processes, again, across society. So I know you'll be very familiar obviously with the built environment, and we're obviously renowned as the potteries in tableware, but we're so much more than that. We've got products, as I say, going across everything from power generation, industry, all the steel industry, cement, glass, chemical, where refractory products line the kilns, and then all manner of different applications throughout society. And we are a solution provider to many key roles, including in tackling climate change as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of decarbonising the sector, we are one of the hardest industrial processes to decarbonise, and personally I do think we are probably the hardest of sectors to reduce carbon emissions within, and that's due to a number of unique characteristics. Again, please, Paula. So firstly, challenging. We've got lots of production sites, and these are dispersed all across the UK, often where, particularly in the heavy clay sector, co-located where raw materials are found. So the first part of our challenge is we're not near these what we call these government designated industrial clusters, and these cluster areas are where the government has put in a lot of focus in and support on new technologies, things like hydrogen or carbon capture, that are seen as key technologies for the future. So lots of sites all over the country. We're obviously an energy intensive industry, and the energy intensive is key to, again, creation of all the properties that the ceramic products are renowned for and needed for. But in terms of versus other industries, we are relatively small, both collectively and individually. And also the carbon emissions from the processes are more dilute than in other sectors as well. So lots, again, of sites and small emissions. So what we've got 90% of our sites which are classed as what we call small or ultra small emitter sites. So that gives you a feel for, you know, the scale which things are at. Also, it's not just about changing the fuels, using cleaner fuels, and when we can reduce our emissions. There's emissions that come from the clay itself and other chemical reactions associated with the manufacturing process. So you'll see across the bottom of the screen what's an indicative breakdown of what our overall emissions from manufacturing look like. So there's a proportion that comes from the electricity that we use, so that's called the indirect emissions. We've got the direct fuel emissions from the firing stage, and then the process emissions from the clay. And you'll see the process emissions, it's just under 30% of our carbon emissions are from the actual clays and raw materials. So that particular part is what we call hard to abate. So I'll talk more on that shortly. And lastly, we've got a large number of small and medium-sized businesses within the sector. So ceramics industry overall, we are about 3/4 of companies that are SMEs. So again, that they have obviously limited resources, financial resources, staff to designate in terms of looking at this issue. Again, please, Paul, just knock it on. Complex. So to say, ceramics is heavy clay products, but it's also what we call the white wares. So wall and floor tiles, sanitary ware, table and giftware. So obviously they undergo glazing. And then we've also got technical ceramics, which is all manner of different products going into lots of different sectors and uses. Refractories lining the kilns, and also the suppliers to the industry. So basically, cumulatively, we've got lots of diversity in the products, in the types of processes that are being used, and that also leads into the breadth of different emissions, both, as I say, the scale of the emissions and also the types of emissions, and the breakdown across individual sites can vary quite drastically. So what that means is we need a range of different decarbonisation solutions to help reduce emissions in the sector. Paula, again. So that decarbonisation, the sector can't do this alone, or any individual company can neither. There's so many conditional elements that will underpin how we can decarbonise as an industry. So first and foremost, a big one is around alternative energy supplies. The sector is obviously using a lot of natural gas, predominantly to fire kilns at present. So alternatives where we're going to change in terms of fuel switching, the actual availability of those energy supplies is obviously critical in allowing the sector to change to different fuels. The competitiveness and commercial viability of switching to different fuels is one angle, but also competitiveness versus other competitors overseas or competing construction materials. So energy costs and what we call the climate costs, so the carbon emission costs, and how they fare versus other producers, because obviously being energy intensive, energy is a significant proportion of production costs to companies. And then there's a variety of other obviously areas that will play roles, such as the research going into new technologies, funding to support research, but also support companies in adopting some of the new measures as they come out, changes that government may be looking to do in driving companies to lower carbon products on the market, and also the regulatory frameworks within which companies have to operate. So, for example, health and safety regimes, when things like hydrogen are being discussed, the actual health and safety regime around use of hydrogen, if you're in, say, residential areas, where, again, a lot of our members broadly are in, we've got obviously companies in rural areas, but also in residential as well, and next to key infrastructure. Next slide. So, sorry, just go back one, Paul, you skipped. Yeah, so the industry can't do this alone. We need to work with a broad range of different parties, particularly government, and having a supportive government that's putting in place the key enablers that we need to deliver more and deliver further progress, as well as various other stakeholders such as the energy and network providers, technology developers, research organisations, for example. The list goes on, but they all have roles to play in helping the sector to achieve what it can achieve in reducing its emissions. And I come back to the why really with that, is that we need ceramics for society to function. So you know, that collaborative working is essential to delivering the low carbon transition for the sector. So we've put together a new ceramics industry decarbonisation roadmap, which was launched at the end of January. And this is our vision for the sector's continued transition to a lower carbon economy. It's been updated and aligned to net zero. So that's net zero emissions for the UK, because that's the UK is the level at which the legislation is set. So as a sector, we are looking towards that. We did have a previous roadmap that was done it was published back in 2015, when at the time the UK target was 80% reduction in national emissions. And also things like hydrogen weren't even really being touted as potential solutions to decarbonise any industry. So things have moved on quite a lot. So we've renewed this and refreshed this roadmap to bring things up to date. But it's also given us a really good opportunity to look, Paul, thank you, to look at what we've already achieved so far, where we're actually at and taking stock, and then defining the pathways for the future. We've made real efforts to look at the sector's carbon emission data and gather views from member companies around what they see as being the future. So the principles that we've looked to do this work under is accuracy in the work that we've done, transparency in what we've really seen as we can deliver for the industry, and honesty in that overall picture as well. So what this roadmap is ambitious in what we see as how things could roll out, but we've sort of had given it a reality check in terms of where we see things could realistically get to. So it's all about trying to define. We've tried to prioritise what are the key asks the industry needs, when do we need them, and who do we have to work with in order to realise them. And also these roadmaps get very complicated and technical. So with our document, it's very short, it's quite visual and engaging, and we're trying to tell the story and cutting through with government, with other stakeholders as well, to really punch through with our messaging around the sector and supporting the sector's decarbonisation. Paulus, next slide. So yeah, the carbon emissions data. So we've worked to 2019 has been the baseline year in which we've assessed the sector's emissions. 2019 being the year that net zero was legislated for, but also it's a year that we've got lots of good data about the industry, and it predates obviously the COVID pandemic and the impacts that have come from that, and more recently the economic crisis following the war in Ukraine. So it's our best set of data set to work from. We've modelled that the industry production levels, we haven't envisaged that they particularly change. It's quite complicated when you do this modelling, that you have to sort of set a set of assumptions to run with. So steady state production, but as I say, focus on gathering the complete data set, lots of verified emissions feature within that, using government energy conversion factors, all to try and show that we've approached this robustly. And it's all with ceramic manufacture, so much of the energy is associated with the actual manufacturing and production process. We focus this in on the scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is all about the ceramic production, and carbon being the main greenhouse gas that overarching applies to the sector. So the technologies that we've looked at and how they roll out in terms of deliverability, in trying to show what we see as being ambitious, the ambitions of the industry. If we had various different support from government, we had access to the energy supplies, if electricity grid connections weren't an issue, if there was government funding available, what do we see as being the maximum that could be achieved by the sector with all them put in place? Next slide, please. So just starting with the baseline emissions. So I've mentioned we've got three, we've approached this by dividing the industry up into firstly 3 groups of products. So the heavy clay construction product group, whitewares, and the technical ceramics and refractories. We then subdivided them by the sizes of the sites to help understand how larger sites might look at different technologies to the very smallest sites. We've looked at the breakdown of the emissions within each of those, what we've called in the pots, and then this is what we end up with. So what you can see is obviously the heavy clay construction product sector, particularly the larger sites in the industry and what we call the small emitters, they collectively represent about 80% of emissions in the ceramics industry overall. A lot of that is by virtue of the scale of production versus these other product groups. So obviously larger kilns that making more product means more energy use and firing them, and also more the top bar here, what you can see, the sort of yellowy colour, is the process emissions from the actual clays as well. So you can see that the process emissions vary quite drastically across between these pots. So yeah, this breakdown and being able to think about how the larger sites might use different technologies to the smaller sites, linking all that information together has then allowed us to see more about what we can really deliver for the industry in what technologies we need. Next slide, please. So the sector is absolutely committed to low carbon future. Overall, about in the last 10 years, £750 million or so has been invested. So everything from site upgrades, smaller incremental site efficiency investments, heat recovery projects, adoption of energy management systems. We've already done a big fuel switch historically, changing from using fuel to natural gas. Some in the industry at a small scale of production, but some use electric for firing, and similarly some use bioenergy. There's been some degree of adaptation of products to reduce the process emissions so far, so using different materials, substituting in for clays, and also adapting products to make them in different ways. And then there's lots of generation of renewable power or procuring renewable power, use of electric and low carbon mobile plants and vehicles. So there's all sorts of going on, and at Ceramics UK we've been gathering lots of information about this that we then are talking to government about in terms of showing what the sector is actually doing, or what it can do so far. And that is really what it can do so far is about what's economically and technically viable. So in terms of the last decade as well, about the emissions overall, since 2003, the emissions have reduced by almost half. So the sector's obviously delivered a lot of emissions reductions. It's about where it can go forward now. Next slide, please. And that commitment to the industry's transition, it's not going to happen overnight. You'll see from this chart, this is one of the key outputs from our modelling work, is a lot of the heavy lifting is actually going to be done in the 2040s. So working sort of out towards that. So in the 2020s, we see a lot of the new technologies like hydrogen, like more adoption of electrification only really starting to get off the ground. And that is largely due to the availability of hydrogen or the scale of projects and the pace at which projects are going to happen at. So in the 2020s, there'll be a lot more focus on being more efficient, generating renewable power, the grid, the electricity grid itself, reducing carbon emissions. So we pay for it as consumers rather than direct interventions, but that electricity that we're using is reducing in terms of carbon emissions. And then, as I say, some of the emerging technologies and some product adaptation. And then the 2030s, we're seeing more lifting done by the things like hydrogen and electrification, and potentially some carbon capture at the largest of sites. By which time in the 2040s, when scale up of hydrogen supplies or grid connection capacity or carbon capture is now more viable in the future, because it is extortionately expensive at the moment. So we see that it has a role, but much further down the line. So this gives you a feel for how we see, as an industry, we see things panning out over the next few decades. Next slide, please. As I said before, this can't be done alone. So we have a range of technologies that we need, shown on this waterfall chart, which is sort of the accumulation of how this all comes together. Behind each of these technologies, there is particular challenges and issues. There is also a degree of implementation or research or trials that are already going on. There is each has a set of industry needs that enable us to deliver them, and also key stakeholders that are important that we'll be engaging with as an industry to deliver each facet of this roadmap. So the document is about the what can we do, when can we do it, and how and why are we doing it. And again, it all comes back to we need ceramics in society in the low carbon transition. So I'm not going to go through all of these in turn. There's an awful lot of detail that sits behind all of these technologies. Sort of tease you with some of the information and let you go and look at the roadmap itself, which is available on our website. Next slide, please, Paula. So what are we doing now looking forward? So firstly, we've done a lot of this work with our members in producing this document and gathering their views on this, and obviously their data is also contributing to this work. We are going to be reaching out to our members to help to demonstrate that we have the endorsement of the industry. So actually getting companies to support us in a statement that we're developing that will be shared, that effectively we'll go to government with, to show we have the weight of the sector behind this roadmap. We're obviously always talking to government anyway, but this roadmap now has given us a lot more new information and facts and figures that we can have them conversations with, and also with other stakeholders as well, that we can then go out to engage with and keep this roadmap delivery plan moving forward. So in the coming few months, we're going to do a bit on LinkedIn. It's what we're calling a focus on series. So there'll be a focus on hydrogen, focus on electrification, all the different elements of the roadmap to explain a bit more around what it all means and how this all comes together. I think you would have seen from that waterfall chart, hydrogen is a massive, we see it as being a massive importance to the industry. And by far, it's about 2/3 of the overall fuel switching that we see that would be applicable to, because it's more suitable for the larger of sites than electrification would. So some of this focus on series is about teasing out some of these key messages and raising the profile with various stakeholders and organisations. And then further down the line, we're going to do various progress reporting on where we're getting to, but not just where the industry is getting to, but also what is being put in place to help the industry as well, because that is integral to what we can deliver. And next and final slide. So this is our story. So this roadmap is effectively trying to explain all about the ceramics industry, what we can do, where we've come from, what we can do looking forward, and let's make it happen. This is our rallying call to not just the industry, but all stakeholders to help us and support us on this journey as we continue to decarbonise. So I think the slides are going to get circulated. There's a link from this this banner here that you'll be able to link to the roadmap on, and my contact details are there if anyone wants to follow up after this session. Thank you.